Hello, everybody. Can I welcome you to the drawing discussion this evening with Yvonne Crossley? It's lovely to see a large group of you joining us. So please do. Oh, I've lost my message, so that's interesting. Please do let us know where you're joining us from this evening. So it would be great to know, and it will get you used to using the chat. I'm Anita Taylor, and I am being both Drawing Projects UK and in conversation with Yvonne this evening. We do have a large number of people joining us, so it would be good. I need to let you know that we don't have a co-pilot this evening, so we're going to wait a few minutes for people to join. And so it would be really great to see how
America.
you're. So you've got some America. You can see the
Yeah,
chat and I can't.
I can just see the names
So we're getting off to a really good start here.
and where they're from.
So brilliant. So yes, they're coming in. So that's fantastic. Welcome to Siri from Fife. Great to see you. Good, great to see people from London, Herefordshire, Salisbury, Bristol, Edinburgh, Pennsylvania. It's very good to see you, Holly. Dartmoor, Poole, Yorkshire Dales, Cookham, Northwest Highlands, Dundee, East Lothian. So it's great. From Oxfordshire, hi Ruth. Really great to see you all joining. And I am apologising in advance for the thing that you will see my arrow going across the screen every now and again, because we are just single-handed, and it's not the moment to be single-handed because we're doing this as a genuine open discussion this evening. So we're going to talk through slides and where we are. So I thought that as we've welcomed some of you into the event, and we're still waiting for a good number to join. Great to see Louise from Salisbury. Great to see more people joining. So we've got people from Avignon. So we are international this evening. We've got Pauline from Rhodes, June from Lewis, and someone can't hear us. Can everybody else hear us? Hinton Charterhouse and Fife. I think our sound is working, but please let me know if not. Just gathering a few more people. There we go. You can hear okay, Ruth. So I think if anyone can't hear, you might want to just have a check on your own settings, because we're going there. We are recording this evening and it will take a moment to edit before it's shared publicly, but just so that you're aware, it is being recorded. And I'm going to try and keep participants down on one slide so that I can see. And what you've got in front of you is a shot of the install in the front. And while we just wait for more people to join, I think, Yvonne, we should play the next slide so that people can take a handheld economy model film of the exhibition so that you get a sense of the exhibition if you haven't been able to visit. And we'll play this just while people join us. Octogenarian Dance is on show at Drawing Projects UK in Wiltshire. We're a centre for drawing and contemporary art, and we're very much a kind of artist-led research centre, so public-facing research and engagement, where we do all sorts of things dedicated to drawing, and that includes exhibitions such as this one. It includes running off-site projects or contributing to running off-site projects like the Trinity Boy Wharf Drawing Prize. It includes having studios, drawing sessions, drawing discussions in person and in the real. So you're having a tour of our space through Yvonne's exhibition. And just so it may make you slightly wizzy at the moment because we go into nooks and crannies just so that you get a sense of what's a really fabulous exhibition of 27 new works and an array of sketchbooks. And I'll introduce Yvonne properly in 1 second. We're just, as I said, we thought this would be a good way of enabling people to arrive while you get a sense of the exhibition. And I get to let people into the room. And the show is fantastic. So I can see some comments coming in. It's a really extraordinary show. It runs through both the gallery, the entrance hall. It runs also into our social space through, this is known as the Long Gallery, off which you get to our studios and our project space. And then obviously you return back in to the main space. So would anybody like a second tour while we just wait for a few more people to arrive? Can you bear with us on that patience at the moment?
Oh,
And I love
nice things people are saying.
I know, that's right. So we can chat, Yvonne, which is our aim. But we'll wait for, we've still got some more people coming in. And welcome to anyone who's joining us now. We're just playing a handheld tour of the exhibition at Drawing Project so that you have a sense of the exhibition. We're very much a repurposed building, and we were a former benefit society, which is quite common in terms of industrial cities, where people came in to pay their life insurance, their national health, and all sorts of things. So it's built a little bit like a bank, and they're repurposed spaces. So this is the Chief Secretary's office. We're going out into the entrance hall, which you would normally come in through the very big door, and we're getting a small look at the cafe in the cashiers department. And then we'll move through in a moment. We'll have another look at the entrance hall in a second. You can see some extra works in the cafe space, along with a drawing of mine, which is just sitting there during the exhibition. So I think we have 50 people in the room. We do have more booked, and they may have to be a little patient coming into the room, because we don't want to lose the opportunity to have a really extraordinary conversation with the very wonderful Yvonne Crossley. Which is true. And so once this finishes its tour through, we'll move on to our conversation. I'll introduce you properly, Yvonne. So we've used all our spaces. Now I can't get it to move on. There you go. And we'll start in the entrance to the show. So Yvonne and I decided that we would do this as quite a free-fall conversation. Free form, I should say, not free fall. And talk about where we are. But first of all, can I introduce Yvonne to you properly? It's a wonderful show called Octogenarian Dance. It runs for another 2 weeks, and we're open on Saturday, every day by appointment the following weekend, and we have a finishing event on the 18th. But Yvonne is a really fabulous artist. I've known Yvonne for some time, I would say 20 years properly, since I went to work at Wimbledon School of Art, where Yvonne was vice principal at that time. And Yvonne was born in Yorkshire in 1942, studied painting at Goldsmiths College School of Art, and exhibited in the Young Contemporaries, which was selected by Richard Hamilton, Brian Robertson and Leslie Waddington at the Tate. So an amazing start to a fantastic career, and then participated in many group shows and solo shows, many to do with drawing and contemporary art. And Yvonne is also an academician of the Royal West of England Academy, a member of Chelsea Arts Club, so fully engaged in the art world in all sorts of ways, and worked, as I've mentioned, as an art education, higher education for a considerable amount of time, also whilst maintaining practice and undertaking a practice-based PhD, which was undertaken while you were at Wimbledon, I guess.
Yes.
And so Yvonne left higher education 8 years ago and became only 8 years ago. It's longer than that.
God, in 2004.
Yeah, so long, 18 years ago.
Yeah.
There you go. Time has flown. So left higher education and did something really brilliant. It's just invested in her own practice, but also set up the Drawing Gallery in London, which then moved to Shropshire Wales border, which was the first commercial gallery for drawing in the UK. So really groundbreaking in terms of committing into the infrastructure for drawing. But actually what's been rather wonderful is the investment in your own practice. And I think this exhibition, Yvonne, is such a fantastic credit to you in terms of developing this wonderful new body of work, which I'm going to ask you to talk about a little bit in a moment. But we've just got some stills to show you of the exhibition in situ as we're introducing. And, you know, we're really thrilled at Drawing Projects to be able to present this as a solo show. We work with people over periods of time to think about what will work. But this is a particularly special show for us. And I think it's a really special show because octogenarian dance is a really crucial show. I mean, we're seeing lots of things in the art world about re-seeing the contribution of women and of women of Yvonne's epoch, generation. You know, the show opening at Tate last night is really critical. But this is a really consolidated body of work that not only deals with, I think, a sense of identity as a woman artist, but also in terms of embracing and talking about the positive elements of aging and old age. So it's a wonderful counterpoint in a society that's still very focused on youth and perfection, whatever that might be, all sorts of things about our body. And I think this is both a brave show and a really engaging show. And I think for us, it's been so rewarding, Yvonne, to have everyone come through and the deep amount of, the deep connection and the amount of time they spend with this exhibition is really critical. So I thought perhaps, I don't know if you want to say something about developing octogenarian dance as a body of work while we just move through these slides, stills for the exhibition.
Yes, I would love to. I'd also like to say it's an enormous privilege to be showing here. It's an interesting set of spaces. You're not your normal white cube. It's much more, has a sort of intimate quality. It's a bit like it's half somebody's living room. It's a beautiful space, and also to be associated with something as significant as Drawing Projects UK for me is a real ego boost. Anyway, it's an odd sort of body of work for me because it's complete. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and it's unlike a lot of previous work, which is just simply part of a continuum that goes on and on. This is complete. When, you know, walking away from this exhibition, there will be no more work specifically related to this idea of octogenarian dance. I kind of feel this exhibition encapsulates everything I wanted to say about being 80, you know, and being in this body of an 80-year-old. And before I started it, most of my work has references to the human body, either by being there or by innuendo. So it's, you know, it's one of my major sort of icons that the body is always there, because everything is about being human and the human dilemma and human concerns. The reason this one arrived is there are a couple of pieces in the show which were done before, those little sort of like articulated dolls. There's a set of 4 which go together in colour, and then there's 2 sets of 2 which are Michelangelo's David and Botticelli's Venus, and then a little articulated couple where one is about bones. That's it. And one is that one is about bones and blood. And these were before the octogenarian dance started, and I had been doing an awful lot of collages with the human body, and so in other words, the image was movable. It wasn't drawn and fixed to the paper. I could move it anywhere I liked. And I decided in the end that, in which case, take it out of the context of something else and look at it on its own, which is how come these little 4 figures arrived. These 4, and then there's another 4. These, which are sort of, and in a sense, for me, they were sort of a bit of fun. You know, I quite enjoyed doing them. I they weren't particularly serious. And at the same time, I applied to do an online 6-week course run by Drawing Projects UK called The Body I'm In. And I was looking for something to sort of re-energize, to put new impetus, to look at my practice anew. And that's why I joined. I wanted to change. So it was an amazing course. I wasn't entirely convinced that you could do this online or how it would work. It worked brilliantly. And I did, one of the events was, one of the sessions was self-portrait, a face self-portrait. And oh God, I struggled with that. I struggled and struggled. And I struggled with it because I really wasn't very interested in my face as a sort of image or as a way into something. So instead I started taking photographs of my body from my face looking down. And these were quite powerful images. And I was, they were about being 80. They were about being a woman of very advanced years. And I manipulated them and moved them around, reassembled them. And one of the reasons I'd said for doing this course, The Body I'm In, is because I wanted to somehow express gratitude to my body for having got me to this point, because it hadn't always been easy, and there'd been a lot of hiccups on the way, some just accidental, some natural aberrations, and some where I should have looked after myself better. So I was grateful to have got to this point. And that meant that I was starting to look at these photographs in a more in a way that gave them some sort of praise. This one here was you can see that these constructed photographs. There are lots of different parts of different photographs put together. I mean, they also, I also have the thing about it is actually me. And somebody did once ask me when they were doing some prints for me, is it you? And I was so embarrassed to say, yes, that's my body, that I said, no, it was a model I was using, but actually it's me. And I'm perfectly happy that should be the case. So the ones, some of the other images I used I put them on plinths so that they was kind of elevated into some sort of or a shelf, and so there was it was a mechanism to elevate and sort of praise and a sort of gratitude for the
I think the
some of the
sorry,
and then yes, go on, Anita.
No,
sorry.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. Keep going. It's good.
So and then I moved from the photographs, which were the collaged photographs, and incidentally, in order to get these to hang on the wall, I actually discovered something called foam board with a glue backing, which meant that you could actually put your image directly onto the foam board with no problems about how to hold. And they were very, very light, easy maneuverable, easy for me to play with, easy for me to cut and reassemble. And this column is taken from a photograph of some marble chopping boards that I've got at home, reconstructed. And the figure on the top is constructed by rubbing those collages that I'd made and then drawing into them. And what I like particularly about them is, this one in particular, is they're also picking up what's at the back of that collage. In other words, the masking tape, the joins, the overlaps, which is sort of like a body being mended, a body broken and put back together. And it had those sort of connotations as well.
I think keep going. No, it's good.
You showed me just before that a wooden one. It's a 3-piece pail. Not that one, yeah. I also, that one, that's it, decided that I wanted to try and make these things more permanent. I wanted a different way of working with them. And so this is made of MDF, with painted, and then on top of it, this black drawing is actually tissue paper put on top of the photographs that I'd had, which were constructed, and then drawn into and then cut to fit in rather sort of strange bodily ways the outlines of these three figures. The fastenings, the idea of splitting them up is it's a sort of, I liked the idea of them being articulated and then having possibilities of movement, but it's also about mending something, fixing something, putting something together. It has other connotations with it as well. A lot of people ask me why there's no heads, and why they're that way up. They're that way up because when I photographed them, I photographed them from my head, so the feet were furthest away. So it seemed to me an appropriate way of having them that way up. It seemed to work much better that way up. The heads I wasn't interested in, and my head was being used to take the photographs, the original photographs. So that's why the heads aren't there. I think.
Do you want to say something? I mean, I think the turning them upside down is the thing that makes them. I mean, it's that sense of the visual perception of looking at your own body, which we tend to think of as looking down or across, I guess, trying to imagine.
Yeah.
And then they're uplifted. And I think that sense of making the monumental out of that is a really interesting transformation, very much part of the content and meaning.
Yes, I mean, what I wanted to make them monumental, although this is not that big, but it has a monumental feeling. It just seemed logical to me that the smallest part of the image that I was working with was the furthest away piece, which were the feet. It's because obviously, as I'm photographing from my head, the closest it's bigger, it is bigger, and they just seem to me to have more presence that way up. It's interesting because there is the very, very last piece that I did, the big piece, has a figure the right way up, and it has a head, which is an oddity.
Not that one. I'm going the wrong way. I don't know if I've
big,
got an image of that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some of these may have had heads, and I decided that one. Sorry, I'm pointing as everyone can see what I'm pointing at.
That's all right. That's good.
Here again, we've got two figures with cut off so that you can't see the head, up and down. Now, when I first did this piece, I only had the three figures, and they were in gold like this because I had this idea that, that gold's an icon and that it was, increasing of value. It said something about value. It also had, I mean, I'm being a bit coy about this, it also had something to do with rising up and disappearing down. It had, and I don't want to be more specific than that, but it had something to do with the idea of one's ending. So I put it on the wall, and I was quite pleased with it. And then a friend of mine came and had a look at it, and I'm, quite pleased with it. And she said, "Oh, that's great, but what else?" And I thought, she's absolutely right. It's not enough. It's not enough, this one. This is the last piece, the last big piece that I did. And this is the piece, I'd have to be absolutely honest, that I'm most pleased about. So I took the three figures, I split them apart. They're again made with foam board and gold leaf. And so because the foam board has a sticky back, the gold leaf sticks beautifully. And it also has in it a kind of very, depending on how the light falls on it, a very fleshy kind of texture. So, okay, so I take the three figures, move them apart, and at the same time, I start putting these, you can see these rather strange abstract shapes that on the left and on the right and then on the middle at the bottom. And I'm playing around with these as sort of abstract shapes, and each one of these has a reference to somebody who is important to me. they're all women, and they're not here anymore. So you can't, I mean, there's no point in, I don't need to tell you what they are, because, but I know what they are. They reference something related to somebody that I knew who was important. And at the same time, but really unknown to me, I don't know why, I think I've got 2 dogs, and they are rather beautiful creatures in character and in looks. And I'm taking photographs of them on the kitchen floor. And the kitchen floor is very large Welsh slate. No, it's Chinese slate. Couldn't afford Welsh slate. And that's why these rather strange 4-sided shapes are. But the reason I used them is because they were part of, it started to look to me like a game. It was a sort of like a game of life. And so I started to use these. And in fact, all of these figures, nothing is isolated. Everything fits in with something. You can move from one to another. So it's sort of like a puzzle.
It's very much like a, keep going and I'll ask the question in a moment.
The linking black shape at the back is a sort of linking shape. It has a rational reference, but no one's read it as that, so I don't say. It's a doorway.
The black shape, or yes, it's definitely a doorway, and actually it's easier to be in reproduction than it is in the real, and that's partly because I think we're so engaged with the figures and the images that were in the real, but it's clearly a doorway in the way we can see it now. And I think
go on, Anita, sorry.
No, I was going to say there's something very elegiac, very eloquent about these floating figures, and I think the sense of the anchor of either a portal, which obviously is what a doorway is something, because they're hovering in one certain space, so it's not like going to Hades, or it's that kind of sense of hovering between physicality and light, because I think the gold leaf, it's incredibly difficult to photograph for anyone who's joined, because it's on a very big wall which you can't quite stand back from, but actually that's part of the experience, I think, is that you travel with it, and it's quite mesmerizing in the light because it completely carries light just as any icon would. It's about reflecting that back at you, so you have a sense that you can't quite grasp the physicality, and yet you know that they're describing very physical bodies that feel like real bodies. And I think that's one of the things that's really underpins the whole of the show, is that sense of these are real bodies that have real histories in their physicality about the people who've inhabited them or do inhabit them, and they're very moving in that sense. Do you want us to go back to a different image, or do you want to keep reflecting on? There are some questions coming in around this, around were you referencing Matisse's dancers when he was older and changed the methodology to cutouts,
particularly with the collage? Sorry.
No, I think it's a really good question from Sue, because it does make that connection between both being able to make something very crisp and concise as an image, and at the same time that playfulness and expansiveness, I think, is really very special within these. There's also a question from Saskia about, has the process of doing this project affected how you feel about your body itself? Because it's very much started as a perception and a perceptual exploration.
It's a difficult one, that one, because this body of work has taken something like 2 years. That drawing course was the kickoff, and God, did it work. And so my relationship with my body over that 2 years has changed anyway, because I'm getting older and I don't move as well as I did 2 years ago. It's hard to tell whether that whether it's to do with, I suppose it's made be respected a bit more in terms of its appearance. I suppose it's done that. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I think they're it's hard to get a sense, isn't it, of the impact of what I think has been a really open dialogue with your own body, and I think that's the rare thing. You know, it's a body that, and I think all the way that it's made talks to that sense of how we piece things together, both in terms of understanding emotion, experience, but also the physicality underpinning it. And I think it's quite hard to reflect on, isn't it? It's deeply emotional to think about the space that this went to. And actually, although you talked about the Drawing Correspondence programme providing that enormous leap, and I think it is really interesting about the space between the ones about the articulated bodies and looking deeply at anatomy and what underpins, you know, what's underneath the appearance. I mean, Dave and V does that. It does it very humorously, but it also does it, you know, talks about veins, talks about tattoos, talks about everything that we hide and cover within things, right down to his fig leaf, which we can take away. And you know, there's a sense of playfulness there, but actually that playfulness landed you right in this deep space, really thinking about how amazing our bodies are. And I think that's one of the biggest messages back from this, is that sense of elevation, of looking to the body and thinking about, you know, that whole stigma that you talk about, of the catastrophe of approaching the later years. And yet actually it's really astonishing, isn't it, that our bodies carry us through all of this experience, and they are the thing that we find hardest probably to come to terms with. So,
I think that's true. I mean, going back to Matisse, yes, I was aware of the kind of parallel between the collages that Matisse did when he was an old man. So there was a kind of parallel with that. I was aware of that. But this thing about, I mean, it is a celebratory exhibition. I can't believe I'm 80. I can't believe I've got here, and I can't believe how good it is. So I know I'd be lucky to be able to say that, but yes, but I'm also aware of the complexity of old age, and it's not static, because I mean, there's all sorts of things. There's the way you see yourself, the way other people see you, the way you are in a mirror, the way you are in your head, are all very, very different, very, very different views of the same person. And I was going to say something else there and I've lost it. Yes, there's also this thing about you're the addition of 80 years worth of living. And in that 80 years worth of living are many, many lives. It feels like many, many lives and almost many, many people. I'm not saying that all of that's in here, but it's one of the things that feeds your mind.
yeah, I mean, I think that sense of different identities and where you reside, I mean, that's I think really critical within this. We wanted to talk a little bit about your sketchbooks and the process towards things, which I think also sort of feeds into some of the other questions that are coming through. I mean, one of the most spectacular things, or generous things, I'm going to say about the exhibition, is it's a spectacular show with all the 27 new works through the building. But actually, there are these fantastic, is it 5 sketchbooks that Yvonne, that we have out on display, and Yvonne is very generous in the sense that we can open them up and have a look and see how the ideas are generated. And I guess in a way that's something to do with a research focus in terms of how you put things together, but also deep belief in both the journalistic, the testing, the planning process that can happen in a sketchbook, and the private space that it occupies. And it's a really unique opportunity because you can really, you know, you saw in this image before, lots of people really just exploring what a sketchbook can be. And I wondered if you might want to talk to us a bit about that generative ideation process that resides within them.
I mean, they're very important to me. They're a major working tool. They're a mechanism by which I can converse with myself. I can make absurd assertions, absurd proposals. I can. In a sense, it's a sort of like a safe space. You can do almost anything in it. Somebody said to me who saw them. Said today that they look as though they're constructed to be seen, because they're a bit neat, they're a bit I don't know, maybe they look a bit constructed, but they're not. I mean, I use them to collect ideas, to collect images, to collect thoughts, to examine thoughts, to converse with myself. And I work from the front to the back on the visual work that I'm thinking about. And in there's a lot of abandoned ideas, or, wrong routes, taking the wrong avenue, or and then from the back of each sketchbook at that particular time, I put images that I've collected, exhibitions I've seen, articles I've read, so that the outside world comes in from the back and I'm working from the front. And yeah, I mean, they're sort of notebooks. Rather, they're not really drawing books. They're more like notebooks, I think. And
Yeah.
they are me conversing with myself.
And I think that's such a beautiful dialogue, which sits absolutely at the heart of this whole show, because the larger work is the realized, finessed, shaped, consolidated, synthesized view of that dialogue with yourself. But within the notebooks, they really act as prompts. And I think your gathering of stuff, I think they're very, I don't think they look like show sketchbooks. I think there are lots of workings out in there, whether it's about placement of things that come together, things that consolidate, the references, the things that you've seen are prompts to the other things that filter in as we're making, and things that you might not see until later. We all have that. The synthesis of the way we think through drawing or making is at speed. So there's quite often something there that we haven't quite grasped, and actually the grasping of it isn't needed until another stage, or might never become relevant, but it's something that was a prompt to a way of thinking or a way of realizing an idea. And I think the sketchbooks really consolidate that, because they're quite a period of work, and they actually take us through everything that's in the show.
Yeah.
So it's such a privilege to have that opportunity to literally, they're not precious by any means. They're things that you can really start to make connections about why you made a decision to connect pieces of the body in that way, or why you made a decision to use the first photographic. And for me, there's something about the layering of knowledge and understanding and awareness that comes through the sketchbooks, which sits somewhere in the space of layering that sits in the images themselves. So when you talk about them being a photograph, or a rubbing of a photograph, or a rubbing of the constructed pieces, there's a layering which is somehow I don't know whether it's to do with trying to emulate or create something that's equivalent to skin, surface, identity. There's something about the peeling through, and the way that the process of layering the images also talks to that in a very elegant way, which perhaps you need to see the show to have a sense of, which of course we'll entirely encourage. Do you want me to, I can take the slides down so that we can actually see our audience and have a conversation, or would people like to have another fly through the exhibition, which we can do again at the end? But I think it might be the moment to have some questions from the audience. Some lovely comments coming in. And I think, Sue, you came back with a question about Jenny Savile and the relationship to the body. So is that somebody that you were aware of and looking at as you were making this body of work?
Somebody I'm certainly aware of. I think her work is stunning. It's a much younger body. It's a different body, but it's a body which is seen with a searing honesty. And so I kind of suppose there's that parallel. She's there and she's amazing. Yes. I mean, there's an American artist as well called June, I've forgotten her other name, who does headless portraits of older women, which I've only just discovered, who's also of interest. I mean, it's yeah.
And Katia is saying there's a parallel also to the autophotography of Jo Spence, who
Yes.
would have been somebody quite important to you, I imagine, anyway.
Yes. Yeah. No, I think that's true.
Can I
Sorry.
ask you something about the subjects of your PhD? Because you
Yeah.
was
that's
around, yeah.
Yes, I did that. I did a PhD at part-time. It took 6 years and it was the most amazing journey. And it's I was talking right at the beginning when I said that this particular octogenarian dance was an encapsulated body of work which had a beginning, a middle, and end. The PhD was like that as well. And I think that's because it was in a sense a prescribed research issue which has an ending in as much as it makes certain propositions. That was it was called Proposals for the Funereal Artifacts for a group of women in their later middle years. And I had a professor of sociology as one supervisor, the second supervisor, and then an artist as the first supervisor. Who had his own PhD, but he had it in it wasn't by practice, it was a much more traditional form. And that was a fascinating process. It was, in the end, I had 6 women that I interviewed in depth to talk about. They were in their 50s, late in sort of early 50s. They'd gone through this menopause, so that all of their physical changes in life had happened. And the next physical change in their life was going to be their demise. They were all healthy, so there was nothing there that was problematic. And so it was an opportunity in detail to talk about their perception of their life as it had happened, and their view of the future and their eventual demise, how they felt about that. And there was a lot of interviews and photographs taken, and then I did a series of 4 discrete bodies of work for 4 of the women that I'd interviewed. Interestingly, and I wanted to say, of those women, one has got there's an image on that big piece. In other words, she's not here anymore. But it was an amazing experience. I also turned it round so that they could interview me and ask me the same questions, so that we were sharing the same views. I didn't use that. I did that so that we could participate together. I didn't do any work from what I'd said. I did a whole series of work from what they said, and then I got my PhD in it, and it was astonishing. And the reason it was singular is I kept coming across, when I was doing it, wonderful alternatives that I could pursue. And one of the supervisors kept saying to me, doing a PhD is like walking through a forest. There's a castle at the end, and there's all sorts of paths to left and right, but there's only one path that's going to get you to the PhD. So don't go through all these, which we would normally do, go through all these wonderful labyrinths of alternative pathways. But that was an interesting, and each of the women did have quite a significantly discrete body of work.
I think it's just really interesting that you would have that lens to think about the critical, pivotal points in a woman's life. And I see that as deeply informing actually where you are with this body of work. And that's partly why I just wanted to hear a little bit more about the subjects and how you went about that, because actually it seems to me this is a long-standing investigation, completely informed by that platform that the PhD gave you, and I'm sure it was informed by previous practice. But there's a question in from Juliet, which is, can you talk about how you view drawing in terms of the role it plays in your methodology?
Yes, I am most comfortable working on paper in black and white. It's somehow, it has an empathy, a sympathy, and a kind of a rapport with what's happening on the paper in a way that I don't manage with a Leiden paintbrush or a canvas. And at one point, thinking that I was trying very hard to do paintings. What I did is I sized the canvas, pinned them to the wall, so they acted like paper. So I still had tried to create this relationship with the surface that paper had, unlike canvas on a stretcher, which had a lot of give. I think through drawing, but I do also in the sketchbooks have a verbal dialogue with myself, but I have a visual dialogue as well. So that's, I think that way. I I've stopped drawing necessarily from things seen. I do tend to draw primarily. Well, that's not true, is it? Because look at the drawings in the exhibition.
I wondered if you could talk a little bit. I'm going to divert your question slightly. I wondered if you could talk a little bit about the nature of the frieze and the freestanding images presented on the wall, because in a way they take the wall as a ground, which might be like the space of a piece of paper or something else, but they also have a relationship not just with drawing in that sense, but actually also with sculpture, in the way that they're quoting statues and classical images, but the frieze-like nature of them and that quality might be something to reflect on as a question also in the chat. But if you could just start there, that would be great.
Yeah, I mean, I that's when I started with those little figures with the Michelangelo and the Venus and the blood and the bones, is taking it out of and it was a sort of liberation, not to have to, they were themselves, and I didn't have to start thinking about the context and what the context might mean and the relationship of the context to the human image. I also liked the idea that they were semi-sculptural because they were flat, they stuck on the wall, they weren't in relief. So I like that halfway experience of dealing in three-dimensional terms without them having boundaries. And I'm probably going to go on doing that because I think that's interesting. I like the way that they exist in a different way from if they existed within a rectangle. If they were constrained by a rectangle, and then I had to start worrying about the context of the rectangle.
And so that's, I mean, Ian's questions about breaking out of the frame and using the wall as a vital component. I mean, I sort of see it as a ground. You're describing it very much as liberating the image from the rectangle. The wall's still a rectangle, but it's just a bigger rectangle. But was that something really new? I mean, I recall some wire sculptures that did maybe, or
Oh
wire
yeah, you
drawings.
did. You're right. I'd forgotten those.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
you're right. I did it again. I don't always see. I mean, I don't always see the connections. You're pointing out. You're absolutely right. Those wire figures that were knitted. There were 9 of them, and they hung free on the wall. And they were missing parts. They didn't have. Some of them didn't have half a leg or an arm, or. And at that point, the reason for that, I mean, they carried much more significance because of it. But the reason behind it was, if I'd made them complete, they'd have looked like dolls, and I wanted them not to look like dolls, and the only way to do it was to not make them complete. And they were a series of, what did I say? There were 9 of them, and they came out of my PhD. That was some work for one of the women in my PhD, which I then subsequently carried on and did more figures, and also started to photograph them, and realized that that they also work very well overlapped. So they became much more solid forms when they were overlapped, and that was an accident. I only did that because I was photographing them, and I hung one over the other to get it out of the way, to discover, wow, that was really something.
Yeah, and that, for me, there is a clear relationship between those two, because they kind of occupied a wall space like a frieze, but in a free, liberated from a niche or an architectural device. But I think there is also something there about play, and I think there's a question from Lisa, which is about, they're very playful all the way through. But the similarity to jigsaw, paper dolls, we might dress, I would say, add to that anatomical models that you reveal things, paper books, puppets. How intentional is that? And do you want to say a little bit about that?
I think that's absolutely true. I do have a lot of images and reference points at the gallery, which are like that. You know those doll things that where the paper dolls with clips, and you clip clothes, and I found those fascinating. And then various puppets. I've got puppets in the studio, which Indian puppets, and then Pelham's puppets, those lovely English puppets. So there is a lot of that sitting there in the background, which feeds but isn't directly referenced. Yeah, it's true.
And this, that Tansy Lima is also saying, they seem like characters caught in mid-performance, and they have a life of their own as well as being drawings. And I think that's a really lovely observation, because there is that sense of they're on a tipping point. That's about their dance, isn't it? And that beautiful title that that you have. And again, I don't know if you want to say anything in response.
Oh, it just looked, I mean, a dance is a celebration, a dance. It was and the way the figures are with their toes pointing up, they look like they're dancing. So it was based in what they look like, and actually how I felt about doing that body of work and what it meant. It was a sort of celebratory dance. But they are, I mean, those little figures, those first figures were really made mainly for fun. I wanted a bit of fun. I had
They're great. I mean, they're playful, but they so underpin the rest of the work, which is about your body. So the play with other people's body gives you a form and a structure, and a space to make theatre through drawing and making. Which I think there is a theatrical component to the whole thing, which isn't just about formal dance, but that playfulness. And I love the title. I mean, I love the title that we're thinking about. It encapsulates everything that everyone's sort of very worried about in terms of age and movement and sheer celebration around that. And Raquel Welch does make an appearance.
She does. Yes.
Does she not?
2 appearances.
So there are all sorts of references in there that play with, I mean, Raquel Welch would be the same age. You?
Yeah, I don't think she's still alive.
No,
Yeah.
no, I don't think so. But I'm going to have to
Yeah,
check. Don't keep me on the
yeah, I was about to
recording.
say they just need.
But she would have been exactly. So there's sort of also something
Yeah.
about the looking back to that glamorized sense of body, and yet that's the same generation. There are lots of playful elements in here that weave a set of connections and references, which I think are incredibly beautiful and as someone has just said, embracing of life. You know, they're very much, you know, that exploration of physicality, of play, and all of those elements within it. So it's really terrific. Somebody's just asked if we could do people want to keep talking and show them the fly through so that we can tempt you to drawing projects over the next 10 days and we can keep asking Yvonne some questions. I'm happy to do that if you're happy to bear with it for the last couple of minutes. Yep. So you have to cope with me sharing again. So somebody must have a really good question for Yvonne to answer while I share. And there are lots of wonderful comments in there about the way that they operate. So let's hope we're in the right PowerPoint now.
Can I
Because I've
say
got to.
something, Anita, about the last
Yeah,
piece of work? You know,
yeah.
the piece of work, the big one with the 3 figures and the dogs and the thing. It's 2 meters high nearly and 3.5 meters across. And when I was finishing it, I really am quite fond of it, but also know that it's, you know, once it finishes here, what's going to happen to it? There, it is going on to another show in Herefordshire next year. But after that, what do I do with it? So I thought it was too nice just to put in a box and never take out. And so I got in touch with the British Geriatric Society, sent them a photo, sent them a CV and a statement about the piece of work. And because I know that they have, in London, I seem to have quite big offices because they've got quite a lot of employees, and asked them if they would be interested in having it as a gift. Because it seemed an appropriate thing to do. And the CEO wrote back and said, I can't tell you how excited I was when I opened your envelope, blah, blah. We're
That's
talking
brilliant.
this Friday about how and if it can go there, which I think is lovely. Isn't that
I think
nice?
that's brilliant. I
Yeah.
think that's the wonderful thing. I mean, it Catches asked if it breaks down. It comes in component parts, and it is intriguing to put together.
Oh, nice.
But a brilliant piece, and it is fantastic in that space. So there's a question about working with different age groups. I mean, whether it's something you would want to do, but whether there's a parallel project from Amanda, which is you worked with older women, and it's a question for you as to whether you would consider working with women in their 30s or 40s, for example. But I wonder whether that's, I think your PhD provides a model, maybe in a way to think about
Yeah.
different things. But I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I tell you what, there was a talk the other day with Pauline and Emma. Is it
Yes.
Emma? And Emma
Yeah.
had set up 2 groups, one group with the school children and then one group with I think writers, and she was the enabler to make a link between the Pauline's exhibition and the work in that exhibition and the thinking and the possible work of these 2 different groups. And I thought that was magic. I thought to have someone like Emma to be that conduit between an exhibition and the artist, and then a group of people who could respond and produce some of their own work as a response, perhaps to I thought was wonderful. So in that sense, I'd love to do that. To go back and specifically do the 30s. Oh God, to be perfectly honest, I'm 81 now. No. I my next project, which I'm starting on, is not related to this, although obviously it will impinge on it, and some of it will be influential in a way that you can see, Anita, that I can't always see. I just want to do a drawing. I want to stop this rubbing rubbish, and I want to do a handheld point the drawing stuff at the paper, and I want to do a big drawing that will take me for a long time. I'm thinking
Sounds
I'm setting
wonderful.
a year aside.
That sounds fantastic. And I think that's such a brilliant, somebody did ask that question and I hadn't asked it of you, is what's next if it feels very complete. I mean, we are at 7 and we've kind of only just warmed up and getting going. But really, what a generous conversation about your work, and to pitch. It's really generous work. You're very generous in the way you talk about it and the way that you share it. And I think the issues you raise from it are really astonishing and leveling, and also really inspiring to think that there's more to this journey, because I think everybody reaches a point where, you know, how do we get to the next bit? It's quite hard to see or feel what that would be like. And it's an amazing exhibition, it's an amazing body of work, and it's amazing to have your generosity and energy clearly abundant throughout the show, clearly abundant in your commitment and passion about what drawing and making the work can do. And the one thing I didn't get to is what I also love about this show is how you play with our Art Deco columns and spaces, and actually it seems to sit so handsomely in this slightly eclectic space, partly because of that, because it is about a framing of a concept in a very different way, and I think it's just a beautiful show. So can I say a huge congratulations, a huge thank you to everybody joining us this evening. We're slightly over time. The next Drawing Projects online event is I believe Isabel Rock for Girl Friday Breakfast Club, but there may be something else that pops up in between, and please feel free to come to Drawing Projects in Wiltshire. We're open 12 till 4 Saturday the 11th, open by prior appointment Monday to Friday, the 13th to the 17th, and then we're open, and Yvonne will be joining us for a finissage of the exhibition on Saturday the 18th. If you can make it, we'd love to see you, and come and celebrate the wonderful octogenarian dance, which will make you feel elevated about your own physicality, and think about actually how we talk about aging process, women and their bodies, and be inspired by Yvonne's wonderful work. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
I'll do the clap. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you.
I'm here for a couple more minutes, so we can wave at everybody going.
Bye.
Thank you. Lots of great questions, lots of great contributions. So thank you, everybody.
I mean, there are 85 people there. Blimey.
You're popular.
Oh, no. But if I'd known there was going to be 85, I probably wouldn't have done it. But Anita, when you said it looks good, it looks great in that context, in this beautiful space, these spaces, because you placed it, you and Gary placed it and hung it, and that's why it looks so good. In that
work,
space.
you have to have great work to hang. No, it looks fantastic. So thank you so much, and thanks for such generosity, Yvonne. That was really